And white paint now, we're going to start some roses. I am just going to do swirls. Make sure the green is dry before you do this because you want the white to pop. And each swirl is going to be a guideline to make your petal shapes because roses have different layers. This will give you the pattern. So I'm filling it up and then taking the same brush with some pink and red. See, here's your guideline. I'm just going to do smiley face shapes around that curve. Each part of the swirl gets a little smile, and it doesn't have to be exactly fitting inside the swirl. Don't think too hard about it. Like on the outside edges, the curves can go out from the edge, but always stick along that swirl shape and fill it in like that. Do that to each rose. Don't worry if the white is still showing because we are going to add a couple more layers. Roses are all about the layers, as you know. So I'm going to take some dark red then on the round brush, and almost like in between each of those strokes, I'm going to add some dark red. See how the white is getting filled in? I'm sticking with that swirl shape, but it's adding more layers and more depth as you do this. Now, they can be overlapping, so don't try to fit them exactly. My best advice is don't think too hard about it. Just loosely go around in that swirl guideline, and they will start to take shape. And I'm going to do that to every single one. Now, what I like to do, there's usually a little bit of white still showing. I'm going to take a third color. I'm going to take some bright red now and just lightly fill in any of those white spots that got left over. That adds even more dimension, and I think they look really, really pretty. So you can do that to each one and keep it that way. I think that's great, but I'm going to be a little bit extra and even take a tiny bit of white and add some highlights on those petals as well to make them pop. I think that also brings out the white vase more dimension. And let's have some petals that fell off on the table. I feel like you needed a little bit of something. There we go. For lilacs, I like to use hot pink, purple, and some white with a sea sponge. This is all about layers today. I'm going to take some dark purple first and just bounce in on the tip of my stem. One shape of a lilac. Notice how it is thicker towards the stem and almost goes to a rounded point at the top. You don't want them to be too big. I would start on the smaller side and then get larger. I've had people go overboard with this and it turns into one big flower. So keep them on the ends and then extend them out. Then without washing the sponge, I'm going to dip into the hot pink and I'm going to layer it over top. I'm not going to go over the entire thing, but notice how I layered it over top of the purple so the purple is still showing towards the bottom. This also acts like a shadow, and I'm going to do that up every single lilac just like that. They're already starting to look three-dimensional. There we go. And then the white is what ties it all in, so you can shape them a little bit more, but as the highlight, I'm just going to take some white and highlight over the top. I'm doing the same thing like I did with the pink, but I'm not going over it quite as much because you want to see those colors through the white. There we go. That's an easy way to do lilacs. Then taking my round brush again, I'm going to add a few leaves. I'm only going to do 2 or 3 and then fill them in with that dark green. You could use the fan brush trick for this one too, but I like to be a little bit more specific with them. And then going in with some of that light green from the background, I'm going to highlight those little leaves there. And don't forget the stems. The more highlights, the more three-dimensional they will look. And there is an easy spring painting of lilacs and a butterfly. So grab some scissors. This is where it gets interesting. We're going to use some bubble wrap. Kids love to do this one too, by the way, if you're looking for a good kids painting. But I'm going to take the bubble wrap and cut it into a couple different sheets that look like this. And then with a mop brush, I'm going to pick a color. Let's do pink first and brush it onto the textured side. Never dip into the paint directly like we do with the sponge because you'll get too much, but just brush on a thin coat, fold it like this and tap anywhere you want a little cluster of flowers. This is a great alternative to a sea sponge as well, by the way, if you're looking for something, but you do get a little more definite circles than the sea sponge. This is great for doing flowers, I think. So I'm going to do a couple different ones at the top there and then wipe it off. You can get a whole new sheet if you want, but I like to reuse them if possible. So that one looks clean enough. I'm going to brush on some dark blue now. There we go. And then do the same thing, just a couple different taps. You don't want to lose your grass, okay? Don't lose it because this is so much fun. Some people cover their entire painting and they lose the whole composition. So I'm just going to do a couple different spots. Let's do some yellow in here. I did grab a new sheet for that because I don't want them to turn green. And by the way, the blades of grass that you made really tall don't have to be the stems to the flowers. Some people think that they have to cover all of those because they think they're the stems to the flowers. They're not. They're just blades of grass in there. And I'm going to add some white. I always like to do white last because that's more of like your highlighting. So I bounce that all in, especially at the bottom. See, I'm probably even going too far, but that's okay. I like color and texture. There we go. So have fun with it. You can always add more blades of grass in between if you need to, if you do too much, but I think that this will work. See, that was super easy, but it always turns out super, super cute. Slightly higher on the left side of him, making sure it's spaced out enough for some petals, and then a slightly even taller one at the top right. So 1, 2, 3. Use white first on a medium round brush. This is going to be a repetitive step. I'm going to start at the edge of my circle, press down, and pull out, lightly pulling up as I get out towards the outside edge of my petal. So press down and pull out. Always straight out from that point that you start at the very edge. Don't worry if you mess up your circle a little bit because we can go back and fix that later. But I'm going to do that all the way around my circle. Notice how no matter where I start on that circle, I'm always pulling straight out from that point. All right, and I'm doing that to every single flower, and then dry it. We used white first because now I'm going to go back in with some bright yellow and do the same exact thing. It doesn't have to match up exactly, but if we hadn't done the white, the yellow would have turned green because of the blue in our background, and we want it to be vibrant like the sunflowers usually are. So I'm doing this to every single flower again, the same stroke all the way around until the white is pretty much covered. Don't worry if it isn't completely, but this time I'm going to go in with some like golden yellow, doing the same thing, but notice I'm not going all the way out to the edge. It's okay if the white and the bright yellow peek out because that gives you a little bit of a halo around it. It looks like a highlight, really pretty. So I'm going to do that to every single flower again. And it doesn't, like I said, have to match up exactly with every single brush stroke. You're just layering the paint colors to make it look three-dimensional. So I'm also going to go in with some nutmeg brown that I used from my background. And I'm doing the same stroke, but much shorter, like less than halfway out from my petal. Sunflowers sometimes have sunken in centers, so this is a little bit of shading, if you will. It's going to make it definitely look more three-dimensional or more golden-like a sunflower. So do that to every single flower. This is a pretty easy painting, but very, very repetitive, so it's going to take you a little longer than some of the other paintings I've shown you. And then, like I said, we can go back and fix up those centers. Just use your pouncer again with black paint. Oh, that's so much better. Do that to every single flower then to add those centers back in. I'm also going to do some highlights to the centers of my flowers using a fine sea sponge. I'm going to start with nutmeg and tap in some seeds. I start with nutmeg, which is a darker color. Then I go back in and I usually use some tan. I use a lot more tan than the nutmeg because they really pop out from the black background of the center. Look at all those seeds. Ooh, I love sunflower seeds. That's making me hungry. And then I always do pops of white as well. Not covering as much, just more like a shine. Then I'm going to do something that a lot of artists are going to cringe at because they're kind of breaking the rules. We're going to smoosh a brush. This is just another type of makeup brush I got from Dollar Tree. So I have a special set of them that I kind of ruin this way. But for a reason, take any two shades of a color, like a dark and a light and some white, and you just smoosh it over top of your leaves, and that gives you flowers, just like magic. And the more you do with less paint, it gives you even more fun texture. I like to fill up my vase like that. Maybe some even fell off onto the table. And you can do it with any color combination. So some of my other favorites are purple and yellow. Let me show you what the purple ones look like. They're really pretty, and yellow ones too. Kind of look like marigolds, like that. And you can even do a combination of colors. So purple and yellow sometimes go well too because they're complementary colors. white paint, make a dot for the center, and then press down and curve a brush stroke into the center. We're going to go around in a circle, spacing them out almost evenly, pressing down harder at first and then curving it up towards the center. Notice how they're always curving into that center point. And then while it's still wet, we're going to add a little bit of shading with some gray, always starting in the center and pulling out from that center point through each petal. There we go. I'm also going to tap in a dome shape a little bit of yellow for the center, and then with some dark brown paint, I'm going to give it a smile. That's going to give it a little bit of a shadow. That's how you paint a super simple daisy shape. I'm going to do this again, going around in a circle, curving each of the brush strokes into the center. And then while it's still wet, I'm going to take a little bit of gray and brush out from the center. That's going to give it shading. Don't forget the yellow and give it a smile. I just added a couple, but you could add them anywhere you want. Also, don't forget to add a few stems with dark green. Now let me show you another type of flower. This is just a generic pink wildflower. I'm going to do 3 strokes each flower. 1, 2, 3. See that? Does not have to be super perfect as long as there's 3 points somewhere at the top and they meet down at the bottom. Bigger ones towards the bottom because they're closer to you, and tiny ones in the back. I'm also going to add a couple teeny tiny taps just way in the back. And then I'm going to mix some brown in with my red. Taking a little bit of that color, I'm going to add some fronts to my flowers by not covering the blob all the way to the top, but I'm just doing a couple strokes further down, covering the bottom and up about halfway. See what we're doing here? We're making it look 3-dimensional. Don't forget some shading on the ones way in the back. But this is going to make it look like an open flower instead of just a single flat flower. Don't forget to take your detail brush and add some stems, and then I'm even going to add some taps of yellow and white up in that bright area to make it look like there's something in the middle peeking up through. Very cool. And as a final touch, when they're dry, add some highlights. I'm taking some brighter pink with some white and just dry brushing down from the top of that shadow layer. And that's going to start making the flower look really 3-dimensional. See how easy that is? They could be open tulips or poppies or whatever you want. I don't know what kind of flower they are. They're just one of my favorite ones to paint because they're so simple. Don't forget some highlights in the back. And then let's try out all the cool colors. I'm taking some dark blue and a detail brush and tapping into a lilac shape, just tiny little dots. And then on the dark blue, I'm going to add some purple and then a couple tiny light blue dots to give it highlights. Go from dark to light. That's what's going to make them look 3-dimensional. Can't forget some way in the back too. I did them all over. Don't forget to add stems and grass where needed. It's really up to you how much detail you do, but as a final touch, I'm going to take my fine sea sponge and a tiny bit of white paint and add just a little bit of accent white flowers all throughout the back to make it look like the daisies go all the way through. I am so ready for spring. I don't know about you. Okay, so we're going to do something a little different today. Kids love doing this, but I think it's fun too. Very relaxing. I'm going to do a swirl technique today, taking dark red and just putting little dollops, then also light red over top of that, and also some white. Space them out so you have room to grow them, but I'm going to take the brush handle and swirl each of these dollops into a rose shape. Don't want it to be a perfect circle, so you can then elongate it and make kind of a wavy outside edge. But do this slowly to each one. It's important to note that the canvas has to be laying flat on the table for this so the paint doesn't run. And you also might want to use glossy paint. I'm using Apple Barrel Craft Paint for this one, and their bright red is actually glossy. Even though it says it isn't, I noticed it has. And glossy paint won't crack when it dries. So either do that or add a pouring medium of some kind so that your roses don't crack when they're dry. Once you're done doing this too, you can also add them wherever you need. I needed an extra one there, and you can fix up the edges however you like. And here are the roses the next morning. You see how the glossy red sunk down into the roses? I'm really impressed that the paint didn't crack on this because I didn't add medium to the other colors, but super easy rose painting. I also down, twist, and pull up where you want the center of your dandelion to be. See, it's not right in the center, but it's a little bit up and over to the left. Then dry it and grab something round in your house. I just grabbed one of our dinner plates because I thought that was a good size for this size canvas. And try to center your dot as much as possible and use a pencil to get a little bit of a guideline. See that there? You can just barely see it. Now with a detail brush now, I'm going to take some tan from that center and start making some straight lines out towards that round circle we made. So on the outside edge all the way around this center point, pull some lines out. They don't have to be perfect, but you're getting the illusion of seeds sticking out of the center of your dandelion. The trick here is do not go outside the pencil line that you made. This is going to make it look round all the way around. That's your guideline, so do not go outside it, but some can be shorter if you want. Also, another tip, use the smallest detail brush you can. I'm using a size 0, but if you have smaller, use that. I'm even going to do a couple lines coming out from inside the circle, but not as many because I don't want to lose that center point. Now wash your detail brush again. I'm going to take some white paint now and do the same thing. Not going outside that circle, but adding straight lines coming out from the outside edge of that center circle. And I'm not covering up all my tan either, but they're kind of intermingled with each other. You can see some tan and some white, just making it a little bit fuller. And don't forget a couple coming out from the center of that center circle. Now taking a size 8 flat brush, I'm using a soft bristle brush because I want the dandelion to have a soft fluffy edge. We're going to do short back and forth strokes with white paint all the way around the outside edge. Now this is your chance to hide the rough ends of your seed lines, and we're also hiding the pencil guideline. So I'm going outside the pencil line a little bit, but it doesn't have to be an exact perfect circle. See how they are slightly uneven on the outside edge. This is going to give you the halo effect around your dandelion because all the seeds are bunched up together. If you've ever held a dandelion up, this gives that illusion. So I'm doing that all the way around the outside edge, and you want it to be brighter white all the way around that outside portion, but you can dry brush in towards the center. Like see here, I'm taking some of the paint on the brush and just dry brushing it in towards the center to make it look a little bit fluffier. Now take your detail brush again. We're going to work on the front of the dandelion. I'm going to take some white paint and make dots all the way across the front of it. And I'm spacing them out pretty evenly. I'm not measuring it, but eyeballing maybe about 1.5 to 2 inches apart. These are going to be the center points of your seeds, and we're going to fluff them. So do that, do some even on the outside where the white is, and then take some white paint, and on each of those dots, we're going to make maybe 6 or 7 little curved lines coming out from that dot. They're always starting on that center point and then pulling out and down a little bit, like gravity is pulling them out. If you did the palm tree video, it's very similar to that actually. Let's see, how many am I doing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7 or 8 maybe. Up to you. It's okay if they cross over each other. And this is where it starts to get really trippy. So trust the process. Because you have those lines coming straight out in the back of the dandelion and these are crossing over it, it's going to give you the illusion of a full round object, which is really cool. So now how many of you think that a dandelion is a flower and how many of you think it's a weed? I saw a quote the other day that was perfect. It said, the difference between a flower and a weed is an opinion, which I think is so true depending on where you live. I know here they are weeds, but I think the flowers and the puffs are so pretty. I call them flowers sometimes, but I don't know. It's a difference of opinion. Just don't sneeze. Now, did you see how I blow dried those seeds on the right side? I am right-handed, so I was having trouble when I was practicing with this by smudging them. So make sure after you do one side to dry it because it does help to rest your hand on the canvas just a little bit to help steady it. So don't smudge your seeds, especially after all this detail. I'm going to finish these up on the left-hand side, add a couple more on the outside. Even though you can't see it, it adds a little bit more texture. Add some more in there. Maybe I am like 9 or 10 now. It's up to you how fluffy you make it. And then to give them a center point again, I'm going to use some of the tan in just the very center of each to make them pop. I'm probably going to make them darker later, but I don't want to go too dark at first. I kind of like the tan because it brings out the seeds in the background as well. And I'm even going to darken the very center point just a little bit with some dark brown. You could have done it just dark brown instead of dark brown and tan, but I didn't want it to be too dark, so I just added a little bit more dark in the very, very center then. Now, taking a size 8 round brush, I'm going to take some green and tan. I probably should have done this first, but I didn't want it to be a distraction from the puff itself. I'm adding a stem. See, it's not going straight down, but it's slightly tilted from the right a little bit off center. And add a little bit of shading there, and you can fix up the edge wherever you want. And around the edges too. Now, this is kind of optional, but it gives you the illusion of the side of the seeds that are just turning over the edge. Taking my detail brush with some white paint and doing some lines coming out from that fluffy outside point. So some are curved to the right, some are curved to the left, some are kind of straight out. It's up to you, but I think that just gives it a little extra dimension, which is really, really pretty. So do that all the way around. And then I'm going to also take my detail brush and add some seeds flying off. This is always the fun part of making a wish, is blowing off the seeds. So I did some dark brown lines, and then on top of those dark brown lines, I'm also doing some white. And about halfway down from that white portion, I'm going to curve some lines out as well. That's their little parachute that blows in the wind. See, 1 or 2 are straight and some are curved to the left or to the right. This is kind of optional, but if you take a crumpled up paper towel with just a little hint of white on it, like wipe most of the paint off, I am smudging the white paint off the edge of the dandelion and out towards the seeds, just to give it the look of them blowing in the wind a little bit more. I'm going to smudge it a little bit more towards where the dandelion actually is and then fade it out towards the seeds. I think that just gives it a little bit of something, but totally that's how you paint an easy dandelion. Start adding our tulip flowers. So I'm taking the medium round brush with some white paint and making a teardrop shape. That's the center of your tulip. And then you're going to do another teardrop that leans to the left, but it's overlapped in the middle. And then a third teardrop shape that overlaps in the middle, leaning to the right. See that? That is a simple tulip. If you want to make it look a little bit more realistic with layers, just add a couple more points. See, I'm going to add a point to each of those leaning ovals, and we're going to practice this a couple more times. So there's the teardrop shape. There's one overlapping leaning to the right and another one overlapping leaning to the left, and add some extra points at the very top to each of those. The middle one's kind of optional, depends how many layers you want it to look like it has. I'm going to add some stems. So I know tulips have different color stems, but I added a little bit of brown and white to these because pick the colors you want for your tulips. I know there's so many different kinds. I'm doing bright pink and red together, and I'm filling them in the exact same way I created them, but because we did that white layer, it really stands out. And then while it's still wet, I'm taking white and I'm adding some highlights. So fill each one in and then take the white, especially highlight at the top and along the edges, especially where it overlaps so you can see the definition. And do a second coat because I want them to be very vibrant. I'm going to make the highlights more vibrant and add some color towards the bottom as a second layer. Oh, look how much more vibrant that is. And at the very end, I like to go in with just pure white then and make the highlights really stand out. It depends on you how vibrant you want them to be, but I like to do that to everything at the very end. And don't forget to connect your flowers to the stem. It doesn't have to be super noticeable, but on the edge of the curve at the bottom, just pull a line into the stem on either side. And there you go. Have one part. We're going to add some flowers. Take a round brush. I'm going to show you how to do a lazy flower shape. I made a dot with a dark color. I'm using dark pink. And have you ever played with one of the spirograph toys where you just go around and around and around until you reach the other side? That's what we did here. Make a dot. I'm doing a lighter shade next before it dries. And I just keep going around and around in a circle until I reach all the way around. But it's always crossing. The circles are always crossing through that center point. Make a dot and then just keep going around and around and around. Kind of makes you dizzy. But the trick is you're using a dark shade and a light shade of a color. So leave a little bit of the dark shade peeking out from around the outside edge. And you can do this with any color combination. So I did 3 pink flowers and I'm going to do a couple blue ones here. Round and around and around, and a light blue shade going around. There we go. We're gonna add more details to them, but this is just the base color. And you can really do any type of flower you want, so just have fun with it. He could be getting into all sorts of stuff. Now, I'm gonna also take a smaller little brush and add some white dots in the center of each of these flowers. And how about we add a couple little white flowers? I'm just gonna dot in some white all throughout the green as like a little bit of an accent. Really makes it pop and ties in all the white from that bunny. Why don't we even do curves in the flowers? That kind of makes them look like the pattern in the pine cone too, which is cool. Okay, so to do the cherry blossoms, we're going to use a skewer or a shish kebab stick. Making me hungry, but we're going to use the circle end of it, and we're going to take some white paint first and just dab, dab, dab. Now, the first time you dab with it, it's going to give you a big circle, and then the more you dab off the paint, it's going to give you this little bit of texture. I love this for doing cherry blossom trees because you have much more control than using a sea sponge, which you could technically use the sea sponge if you wanted to save time, but I want to be a little bit more particular about where these blooms are. Notice how I'm covering the branch, but I'm also bringing the blooms out from the branch and coming down. There looks like little fingers coming off of the branches. Even towards the middle of the branch, I have these little appendages of blossoms hanging down. That's because the blossoms are so heavy. And when you get to a certain point, don't worry too much about the top because cherry blossom trees, especially in full bloom, are really, really thick. So then I am going to take my sea sponge with some white paint and dab in some texture that's a little thicker at the top. I actually really like the look of the sea sponge and the shish kebab stick dots on this together. I think that looks really, really cool. And my husband and I did go to see the cherry blossoms in DC this year, and I was actually surprised to know that most of them were white, but they were tinted pink just a little bit. So I'm going to go back in then and take some light pink and a couple dots of dark pink and kind of space it throughout. Same thing with the sea sponge at the top. So that's how I did the cherry blossoms in this. There we go.